With 132 million users and an unrivaled selection of sports trading cards and memorabilia, eBay is the home of collectibles. Premium trading card singles, live card breaks, unique game-used memorabilia, all the epic finds you need are right here on eBay. Collect with confidence by downloading the eBay app on the App Store or by going straight to ebay.com/theathletic. That's ebay.com/theathletic. Start building your collection today. Ever feel like everything's getting more expensive? Groceries, rent, even breathing. And let's not forget car insurance. It just keeps creeping up. But here's the thing. Insurify makes one part of life easier. It's an insurance comparison site that finds real-time quotes from dozens of top insurers. Insurance companies compete for your business, driving down prices. It's like having a friend who knows all the best deals, but without the smug grin. You could save as much as $1,025 a year, and you might even cut your bill in half. The best part, it's all online. No phone calls, no spam, no nonsense. You can be covered in as little as 10 minutes. And with an excellent star rating on Trustpilot, saving feels less impossible. So why not give it a shot? Visit Insurify.com and see how much you can save. That's INSURIFY.com. Average potential savings based on initial quotes received by 183,234 customers seeking insurance through Insurify. Actual savings may vary depending on state of residence, individual circumstances, coverage selections, and insurance provider. Savings results are not guaranteed.
This is a message from sponsor Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was feeling stuck trying to squeeze in getting tax help, but never having enough time. Now Taxes is getting a TurboTax expert who does your taxes from start to finish. While they work on your taxes, you get real-time updates on their progress. And you get the most money back, guaranteed. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees.
The Athletic.
The race is on, and F1 hit the O2 in London for an all-singing, all-dancing launch event. While the 2025 cars weren't there, the liveries, drivers and team bosses were, along with 20,000 fans. So was it a hit or a miss? And what did we learn from it? I'm Edd Straw, and joining me here at the O2 are John Noble and Charley Williams. Let's get straight into it, John. What did you think of it?
I liked it. I arrived here quite sceptical about the whole thing. I thought, this is a bit too much kind of showbiz. This is not going to be a great spectacle. It's going to be all compressed, bit too kind of fake and over the top, and I wouldn't enjoy it. But I was enthralled, actually. I really enjoyed it. Obviously, there's a bit of variation. I think some of the teams did a better job than others in the presentation. Maybe we can talk about that later on. But good lasers. Jack Whitehall, amazing. Allowed F1 to laugh a bit about itself. I think the fans loved it. I'm sure the TV audience loved it. I think we've seen some figures of 1 million viewers that F1 was getting on YouTube, which is kind of unprecedented for something like this. So yeah, big tick from me.
Yeah, I thought Jack Whitehall was excellent. I wasn't sure what to expect there, but yeah, really, really did well at bringing the names of F1 into it and just taking a light-hearted approach. And let's come to you now, Charley. Your first appearance on our podcast, one of our social media experts, somebody who works a lot harder than we do, so I'm sure people will have seen your work. What did you make of it? You come from it. You come at it a little bit more with a fan's eye view. That's why you're here.
Well, first of all, happy to be making my podcast debut. Yeah, I kind of came in quietly confident. I thought it was going to be a little bit over the top, but I kind of love over the top. So yeah, I was really expecting greatness, to be honest, and I thought it was amazing. I actually had the time of my life. The crowd was amazing. I got inside and I just looked around and I was like, this is amazing that 20,000 people are here to essentially watch a concert with just some liveries thrown in. And it was actually quite not choked me, but it was just the atmosphere was just incredible to see. And I kept looking around and people were taking photos of like the amazing backdrop as you walked in, and there was people like shouting at all the drivers as they were on the stage. It was I would struggle to find a fault with it, to be honest.
Yeah, I have to say, I saw the same thing from the crowd. I was spending quite a lot of time watching everybody to see how they were responding to it, and there did seem to be great enthusiasm for it. And John, I talked on the podcast, you weren't on the episode, but I was very sceptical. I feared that the paying customers would be shortchanged in this one. But it does seem like it's actually worked, because it's not for us, is it? It's for those who've put their money down and made their way to the O2 tonight.
Yeah, I think today you've got to look at why this event was put on, and it's not to, entertain the hardcore fans who are going to tune in to 24 races and be there through practice sessions and all qualifying. The aim is to give F1 a greater awareness and a bigger picture. We've had media sessions here in the Peninsula Ballroom at the Intercontinental Hotel. We've had press sessions all day. We've spoken to almost the entire grid, a few team bosses. We've seen drivers speak. We've seen drivers on red carpets. There's journalists and radio stations and TV stations who aren't normally covering Formula One. So I think there's been a bit of a cut through, so to speak. And this is the real aim of what today is. It's about cutting through, making F1 even bigger. And I'm sure people are going to be, tuning into TV stations tonight. They'll see it in the papers tomorrow, and it'll just expand F1 and make it bigger and better. And I don't think if you're a hardcore fan who thinks this isn't what F1 is about, F1 should be about testing at Barcelona and long runs and understanding it. But actually, having a show like this is great for everybody, because it brings new people in, gets sponsors interested in it, coverage of the F1 goes up, and it becomes a huge, big success for everybody, because a bigger, better F1 is much better than holding a launch event in a tiny church hall with 5 spectators who are the only people interested. So we've got to be happy that they did a sellout of the O2.
Well, while I'd have been happier probably with a few hours of long running myself, I do think it must have worked, because straight away, those early few minutes, I thought, Charley, with Jack Whitehall and bringing George Russell and Max Verstappen, and really and joking about the liveries as well, about how they're presenting liveries that are all exactly the same as last year, but we'd already booked the venue. So I actually thought it was quite good, because that set the tone for it. And it made sure also, one of the things I was worried about was that people would be a bit let down. They didn't see the real cars, but they did make sure they pushed that element and really made people know what they were seeing. So that seemed to work.
Yeah, I mean, Jack Whitehall, I can't fault him. I've seen him a few times outside of F1, obviously, with comedy shows. And when I saw that he was going to present it, I was like, I already knew that it was going to be really cool. And yeah, I think he did such a good job at it's the personality side of F1 that I think newer fans love, and all fans should love. I think, like John said, where maybe the older fan is like, oh, this isn't how it used to be. But that's part of the problem. I think people shouldn't be looking at how it used to be. This kind of event wouldn't have ever been possible 5 years ago. Whereas now, like I said earlier, we've just packed out an arena of 20,000 people. And yeah, it was... I think it would be great to do it again as well, rather than just have it as a one-off 75-year anniversary event.
And you were obviously wandering around earlier today. Makes it sound like you were just baffled, but no, you were wandering around seeing the kind of people who are attending, and it did seem to reflect the kind of growing, burgeoning demographics that F1's really making strides in. This is not what would perhaps be called a sort of bobble hat Barcelona long run crowd, the kind of crowd that I'd be in. It's something very, very different. Yeah,
I mean, I walked around and you could see there was every kind of fan. I actually walked around one person and they had an afro that was Italian themed, and they had the Italian flag wrapped around, and they were older. And it was kind of like, I looked and I took a little video for social, and I was like, I love that. That's just so great that they're getting into the spirit of kind of dressing up to this event. But you go around and everyone's in different kind of merch. It's kind of like when you go to a Grand Prix, you kind of expect the atmosphere to be electric, because you're all there to see the racing, but this had the same kind of similar vibe where you're all there, and it's just great to be around like-minded fans as well.
Yeah, I kind of got that impression. Everyone there for the same reason, and even though some of the rivalries came out with who was getting booed or cheered or whatever, it was still quite good-natured outside of that. John, my main thought at the end of that is that although this is a one-off event at the moment, F1 75, it can't be called F1 75 again, there's no way this isn't going to happen again in some way, shape or form. It'll evolve, it might move, it might change, but this is going to be something that becomes a regular part of the season in some way, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the question to be had is that not that should there be a launch event in the future. I think it's yes. I think it's what the type of launch event it is and what it works. Because there were some elements of today that haven't worked. Teams launching all their cars, during a show, for example, doesn't work for F1 because normally we've got a great 2-week launch spell. We get new cars and can pour over them and gets fans excited. And there's, big 2-week shop window for Formula One to get in papers, on television and radio. That's been compressed a lot tonight. So we almost had an overload of things happening today. So maybe it works as an event that's actually after all the cars have launched, and it just becomes a season celebration where the teams can show off, whether it's the new cars, whether it's old cars and liveries, and just the drivers, and do some funky stuff. Maybe similar to what MotoGP did in Bangkok. All the launches were done beforehand, and it was just a show thing for the fans. But I think as a concept, bringing everybody together like this, having everyone speaking, getting everyone up on stage, having those pantomime moments where the local heroes are cheered and some people are booed, some organisations are booed. I think all that works. It looked great. I think it's pitching what the specifics of the type of launch event is kind of key going forwards.
Yeah, I think you're right. And actually, I think the elements of launch, revealing liveries, revealing cars, actually, perhaps that was a bit of a constraint that was put on this event. And actually, they don't need that. Like you said, they can do something a bit different. Because for me, my general feedback from it is, and I would have thought that most fans there would feel the same, I'd like to have seen a little bit more of F1 big name team bosses and drivers, a little bit more of that, a little bit less VT, just dial back some of that. Still have the show, but just a little bit more of what people want to see. What do you think, Charley? Do you think just upping a bit more of the star name involvement would work?
Yeah, I definitely think we could have heard more from the drivers and the team bosses and things. I mean, we didn't even get anything from Red Bull at all, apart from the pantomime at the start with Christian Horner. So yeah, I think it would be definitely beneficial if we had more time with the drivers, even if that made for a longer show, because I actually think the VTs were added to the atmosphere. I really enjoyed those parts. There were a few that were maybe a little bit too long, especially for ones that you knew they were going to come out and look the same. But I think, yeah, I would definitely have traded a slightly longer show and maybe earlier in the evening for more time talking to drivers.
Well, given the time we're recording this podcast, definitely would endorse that, but I don't think our podcast timing is a big issue when it comes to the planning for this event.
When you think about red-hot businesses like Allbirds or Skims, they have a lot in common: a great product, a cool brand and brilliant marketing, and a business supporting them along the way to make selling simple. That's where Shopify comes in. Nobody does selling better than Shopify, home of the #1 checkout on the planet, and the not-so-secret secret with Shop Pay that boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going through. So if you're into growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell whenever your customers are scrolling or strolling on the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. Businesses that sell more sell on Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout that those businesses I mentioned at the top use. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/theathletic, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/theathletic to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/theathletic.
This show is sponsored by Liquid IV. Like many people, I've come into the new year full of hopes and aspirations for the next 12 months. Maybe, like me, you're anxiously pacing the floor waiting for the F1 season to begin, or perhaps you've set yourself a more regular fitness goal, like running your first marathon or commuting to work by bike. Whatever you plan to do in 2025, come into your own way with extraordinary hydration from Liquid IV. Powered by Live Hydroscience, Liquid IV helps you break the mold. Liquid IV is so easy and convenient to tear, pour and enjoy, and it comes in several fantastic flavours, like their new Hydration Multiplier Sugar-Free Raspberry Lemonade, and other winners like White Peach and Rainbow Sherbet. As a regular flyer, I know how easy it is to become dehydrated almost without knowing it when you're travelling. That's why I always take Liquid IV on overseas trips. It's more than just a drink, and it's scientifically formulated to hydrate better than water alone. Just one stick and 16 ounces of water provides 3 times the electrolytes of the leading sports drink, plus 8 essential vitamins and nutrients. And what's more, it's always non-GMO, vegan, gluten-free, dairy-free and soy-free. Embrace your ritual with extraordinary hydration from Liquid IV. Get 20% off your first order of Liquid IV when you go to liquidiv.com and use code THERACE at checkout. That's 20% off your first order when you shop Better Hydration today using promo code THERACE at liquidiv.com.
Welcome to Nada Yada Island.
Next on Metro's Nada Yada Island podcast.
I almost fainted when the 4 new bombshells arrived. 4 free Samsung Galaxy A16 5G phones at Metro.
No way.
And finding out the 4th line is free? Oh, things got heated.
That's wild. Join Metro and get 4 free Samsung 5G phones. Only at Metro.
Plus tax. Bring 4 numbers and an ID and sign up for any Metro Flex plan. Not available currently at T-Mobile or been with Metro in the past 180 days.
Right, before we talk a little bit more about the O2 events, obviously this marks the start of F1 pre-season properly. It's official now. So we've got a great pre-season offer for the Race Members Club. You get an incredible 90% off your first month when you join the Race Members Club on Patreon. Gives you loads of access, ad-free podcasts, early access, bonus content, question-asking privileges for the show. There's so much stuff we're doing, and we're actually really enjoying how much more we can do with the Race Members Club this year, and we're going to be doing even more. So there's loads of stuff there on Patreon to check out. The 90% off offer, that's there for any of the membership tiers we've got. So if you just want F1, you can go F1 only. If you want the whole lot with IndyCar, Formula E and MotoGP, that's an option as well. And hopefully it's really good value for money, but this will give you the chance to try it. So head to patreon.com/the race to have a look for yourself. That's patreon.com/the race, and you will find a link in the description for this episode. Let's get back now perhaps more to the way the teams use this, John. There was brief mention before the break about the booing of Christian Horner, which was, part of me thought it was quite funny, but I'm not a huge fan of booing as well. Things like that, obviously, there's a crowd getting involved, so I'm not going to tell them they can't do that, but who do you think made the best job of it? How are we surprised to see, particularly Red Bull, not letting the drivers speak at all? Or do you think that was an inevitable consequence of the fact that they did seem to be treated as the villains of the piece?
Yeah, I mean, there is a pantomime aspect to it, and obviously, Max Verstappen knows that if you go up against, your most recent championship fights were against Lando Norris and Lewis Hamilton, and you walk into an arena of British fans, you're not going to be the most popular driver in the room. So I think he accepts that. I was quite surprised the level of booing for Christian Horner when he went up. Especially surprised as well that maybe the FIA, when their logo went up, there was a huge boo for that which was very interesting. Funny. Really, really interesting. Maybe that's something kind of just to think about over the next few days. But the teams were effectively given 7-minute slots themselves. So this is what you have on stage, and then they could choose what they wanted to do. And there was quite an interesting variation. Some teams, I particularly like Sauber when they rolled out, big show with, drums and laser lights and smoke and everything. It looked fantastic. But some teams didn't choose to utilise the stage much at all. Red Bull had a video of some car culture in the background and kind of dominated it on a big video screen, which kind of I thought didn't make best use of having a huge stage in front of 20,000 people. It just seemed a bit of a waste. So I think it's a learning exercise for some teams. I think people will realise that there are differences, but it's also quite interesting that we had a little vote tonight amongst the race crew, and there's a big variation of the kind of the best to worst rankings. I think people just got different views and things of what they expected it to be. But yeah, it was interesting just in terms of that variation, and obviously something they'll think about in the future. I'm sure if teams came back tomorrow knowing how it had been, some of them will probably do a very different thing.
Absolutely, and it was a blank canvas, wasn't it? So it must have been really difficult to actually work out what to do with the space you've got, what others will do. So they'll all learn from each other. My personal favourite was McLaren, just because they bought a number of cars. Obviously, they had the livery car, but they had a McLaren M23, an Emerson Fittipaldi car, a Hakkinen car, a Lewis Hamilton car, a Senna car, of course. So I really enjoyed that. They were number one for me. How about you, Charlie?
This is probably a little bit of a hot take. I don't think anybody else will pick Aston Martin. I really enjoyed just the way that they brought the drivers out, like into the crowd, and it was all like James Bond themed. I just thought that was really good. But I think an honorary second would probably be RB, or Racing Bulls, VCARB, whatever we're calling them this year. I think...
They gave a whole show to say it was VCARB, Visa Cash App Racing Bulls, and you've not called them Visa Cash App Racing Bulls, so their show's failed.
Can I just say I felt personally attacked by the emphasis on how good their name was?
Yeah, but the whole show, it was really funny. Maybe I was too focused on the actual comedy behind it without thinking about the name. I just can't get it. I can't get behind VCARB. It just doesn't sit right with me.
Yeah, absolutely right to say that. But yeah, it was an interesting mixed bag of these. Alpine seemed to be quite low key. They didn't really seem to put much of a show together with that. And yeah, there's more space that can be used there. So yeah, I think we will have some new ideas turning up. I did want to go back to that FIA point you made, John, because it was quite funny, but actually it also slightly surprised me. I mean, Charlie, you may have a view on this. Just shows how unpopular the FIA have managed to make themselves. And because there was this running theme with the swearing, jokes about that, I felt it was kind of about that and just what seems to be pettiness from the governing body, or what's perceived to be pettiness in the pursuit of a reasonable cause, because I think in press conferences, etc., televised stuff, it's not unreasonable to have a certain standard of speech, but they're very heavy-handed, and that's what I saw reflected in that.
Yeah, I don't think the events of the FIA swearing clampdown has particularly helped in that moment, and especially making jokes about it. But I think it's also kind of like a lasting effect of the 24 season. There were a lot of decisions that were quite controversial amongst fans, and I think the fan nowadays do take that to heart, and they will probably hold on to that. So I think there was also an aspect of that into it as well.
Yeah, that's probably fair, but definitely something, John, for the FIA just to think about in terms of how they're perceived. I know they're there to regulate, they're not there to be popular, but it's just an interesting little snapshot, wasn't it? Yeah,
I mean, I wouldn't be very, very surprised if an FIA logo comes up, just as if a FIFA logo came up and the crowd go, yeah, this is amazing, the FIA involved, because
we love the rules.
Yeah, the regulator, will never get applauded for doing anything fantastic, because in effect, the best regulators are completely anonymous, that you don't know what they do or how they do it. They just do it effectively, basically. And it was only for, was that logo up for 2 seconds, 3 seconds? And it wasn't any build up to it. It just flashed up on the screens above the main stage, and the crowd response was instant. So very, very interesting, I think, because I'm sure, word's going to get back to Paris on this. Mohammed Ben Sulayem was likely going to be, told this is what happened, and it'd be interesting if there is any kind of response or kind of discussions about this in the future.
He can't find all 20,000 people who attended. That's for sure. I'll tell you one other thing that struck me, and it's a very surreal moment. You're in the O2 Arena, huge venue, have massive acts here, and there was a great moment when James Vowles came out and was going, "Hello, London," and I just sort of thought, this is very bizarre, but actually, James Vowles was brilliant, wasn't he? He genuinely, more than any of the team bosses, seemed to sort of command the room.
Yeah, I mean, if being a team principal doesn't work out for him, then there's definitely a career in presenting available for him. He was, I know a lot of people that are big fans of James Vowles, and I don't think I've ever seen a team principal have so many fans behind them. I mean, we had Gunther Steiner had a lot of people that liked him and they thought he was funny, but there are genuine, I've seen people making Vowles t-shirts, Williams t-shirts with his name on the back. So it doesn't surprise me that he got a good reception either, but yeah, he was absolutely brilliant.
I think it's the ability to laugh at yourself and kind of be aware of who you are and not let it get to you. I think worked exceptionally well tonight, because I thought Jack was prodding things and being quite funny about a lot of people, and taking the mickey, saying, F1's the only sport in the world where you can get 20,000 people to buy tickets to see liveries that are exactly the same as they are 12 months ago, which is almost, in effect, pretty true as well, because apart from racing bulls, I don't think anything was massively, hugely different or radical or a big, huge revamp on what we've seen before. The Ferrari, interesting, change of red.
So we're a little bit different.
Yeah. So I think it was just good. It made F1 kind of personable and a bit of personality and a bit of laughter in there, and we could all relate to it much more than, we'll be there next week in Bahrain obsessing over long run times and data and all that sort of thing and loving it. But equally, we loved F1 tonight for what it was in a completely different environment.
Yeah, very much so. I definitely agree with that. And ultimately, Charlie, this is where the growth is for Formula One, isn't it? With events like this and trying to find ways for people who can't get to races to get involved and see their heroes, because that's what it's about, isn't it? They may not be driving on track today, but people want a glimpse of Max Verstappen, of Lewis Hamilton, of Lando Norris.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in that fan spot for many years, and I have lined up outside Silverstone paddock and waited for drivers to arrive. And even if it's just a wave, that has made my entire weekend. So I completely get why people would want to have come to this event. And as for creating more events like this, I think Zach Brown said earlier in the press conferences, he said that he would love to even make events like F1 testing, make them more fan-led, and I think that's a brilliant idea. He gave a lot of ideas, like having autograph sessions, which I feel is something that's actually faded away. You used to get them at every Grand Prix, and now you don't get them at all. So to bring things like that back would be incredible for the sport.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I did think his trying to make tyre testing fan-friendly was an interesting proposition, but yeah, 2 cars going around track all day might not appeal to people. But then again, maybe it would. What do I know, ultimately? But certainly, yeah, there's a lot of talk, and this is going to give F1 a huge amount of food for thought over the coming year, I would imagine.
Pataday presents, in the red corner, the undisputed, undefeated Weed Whacker Guy. Champion of hurling grass and pollen everywhere. And in the blue corner, the challenger, extra strength Pataday. Eye drops that work all day to prevent the release of histamines that cause itchy allergy eyes. And the winner by knockout is Pataday. Pataday, bring it on.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. During tax season, your personal info travels to a lot of places. Between payroll, your tax consultant, and the IRS. If your W-2 gets exposed, that's just the ticket for identity thieves. That's why LifeLock monitors millions of data points every second. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it guaranteed or your money back. Don't let identity thieves take you for a ride. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Look around. You can find cars like these on AutoTrader. Like that car riding your tail. Or if you're tailgating right now, all those cars doubling as kitchens and living rooms are on AutoTrader too. Are you working out and listening to this ad at the same time? Well, multitasking pro, cars like the ones in the gym parking lot are for sale on AutoTrader. New cars, used cars, electric cars, maybe even flying cars. Okay, no flying cars, but as soon as they get invented, they'll be on AutoTrader. Just you wait. AutoTrader.
Let's just finish off by talking about some of the goings on. I was going to say off track, but off arena, would that be the way? Because we did have all the press conferences today. I guess, John, actually the biggest news story that emerged didn't actually come from in this room. We're in the press conference room now, basically, in the Intercontinental, but it was that talk about the mandatory pit stops at Monaco to make sure it's a 2-stop race, which a few of the drivers and team bosses talked about. That's a pretty bold move, isn't it?
Yeah, well, this goes back to the demand from F1 to make F1 much more of a spectacle and be more popular, and everything that made today happen is what they want to do for Monaco, because Monaco hasn't been the greatest spectacle in the past. It used to be, it stood alone by itself as the blue ribbon event. It was everyone knew it was a procession, but it was about qualifying, and you accepted there was no overtaking. But because it was so magical and special, it sometimes didn't matter. But I think these days now, when F1's facing more competition, there's 24 races, there's more venues want it has to produce a spectacle, it has to be popular, and you can't afford really one weekend to not not be good. And last year's event was especially bad because we had the red flag on the opening lap, gave everyone the free pit stop to go onto the alternative tyre, and then we had no stops pretty much and almost no overtaking, and it was the worst that Monaco can be. So part of the discussion today is quite simply in a dry Monaco there'll be unique rules where drivers have to use all three compounds so that it effectively forces a two-stop race. If it's wet, you've got to do 2 pit stops, so it's also a 2-stop race, and then we'll shuffle it around. You may end up in a scenario where it's a 2-stop race, but everyone stops in the same 2 laps anyway, and it doesn't make anything better. But I think it's a chance to mix it up, especially if we go for the C6 compound, which is pretty much a qualifying tyre, so it won't last long in the race. Do you start on it and pit early? Do you save it to the end? Do you burn it in the middle? So I think it could open up some strategic variation. And it's just F1 pushing. I think the worst thing F1 could do is just sit back and not do new things and not try things. And it's better to do things and they fail than not do anything at all. And it's doing things. It did this event today. I think it's been a success. And hopefully what it does for Monaco works as well.
Yeah, it seems like a pragmatic idea, I think, because it is a little bit artificial. But, Charlie, obviously you'll know what the younger audience thinks of a race like Monaco. Obviously, somebody like me loves Monaco and will defend it, but you can see why something like that needs to happen. So there's something more at stake in the race than just a procession all the way through with one stop.
I'm usually a chronic Monaco defender. I am along those lines. But I just have a feeling that this isn't going to help. And I know it is better to try than not to try at all. But from a media perspective of looking online today and seeing people's responses, everyone's kind of done with Monaco. They don't want all these specific rules for just this one race. They think that is too artificial. So I think they would rather just not see Monaco on the calendar at all, or do something to the track, which, it's probably not doable around Monaco. Or a lot of people say, change the cars. The Formula E have no problem with overtaking around Monaco, and they're much smaller. But I don't see how it's going to really improve overtaking or improve racing. But anything's worth a go.
Yeah, certainly not going to do anything for the actual overtaking, but if people are hoping for that, that's certainly not something that's going to happen. Lance Stroll made that point actually today in the media sessions. What else do we have today? We had Jack Doohan obviously facing the media on the presence of Colapinto. That was quite interesting, wasn't it, John? Because he's in an invidious position on that, Jack Doohan, because he can't say what he thinks about it. Of course he knows he's under pressure. We know he will not be delighted that Colapinto's there looming, but he just sort of had to try and weather it, and then there were no more questions allowed to be asked about Colapinto after 2 had been done.
Yeah, he brushed away the first questions and he said so there's no more pressure on him despite Colapinto's there. Then another journalist tried to have another go at a question which got shut down by the Alpine PR man. But it's one of those things that teams created a situation where it's clearly taken a driver because it views him as a potential future race driver, because otherwise you don't sign someone on a 3-year deal for them to be reserve driver for 3 years, and there's no way a youngster would sign up for 3-year contract to be guaranteed reserve driver for 3 years. So this is about a future race seat, and then in the reality of F1, be annoyed that people are asking you about if you don't perform, you're going to be out. I mean, I think Jack has a point that there's pressure on all the time, and irrespective of Colapinto being there as reserve or if he stayed at Williams, if Jack wasn't performing and there was a gap to Pierre Gasly, then the pressure would be on and he'd probably be out as quick as if Colapinto was there. So ultimately it doesn't change much, but he's going to get asked again. He's going to get asked in testing. He's going to get asked at the first race. He's going to get asked at the second race. He'll be asked at the third race, and it'll go on, and the pressure will be there, and he's got to perform, but he would have to perform anyway, ultimately.
And he'll hope he's still being asked at the 10th race because he'll hope he's still there. But it didn't help that they announced that Mercado Libre sponsorship a few minutes after he finished speaking as well. Obviously, they'd backed Williams for a bit at the back end of last season as well, so it's clear where that deal's come from. Who else do we have? Anyone catch your eye, Charlie? You're in the press conferences as well. There's obviously a lot of covering some of the same ground. We had the McLaren drivers, the Williams drivers, but we'd heard from them last week. Obviously, Max Verstappen's always a popular attraction, but it kind of underlines the fact that it's still very pre-season, isn't it? this is perhaps the flip side of the argument to have more on stage from the drivers, because there's only so much they can say about the year ahead.
Yeah, every presser seemed a little bit samey today. It was kind of like the initial questions for what did you think, what do you think about the event coming up, and have you had a nice summer break and things like that. So I think, especially as like not many of them had even, only McLaren and Williams who'd actually seen the cars as well. So there wasn't really anything to discuss apart from it was all kind of like ifs, buts and maybes. So yeah, it would have probably been better to hold back a little bit of the presses today and maybe had a few more questions on stage for fans to see, because I don't think anyone said anything really that was, that wouldn't have been suitable for on stage either.
Yeah, very much so. It's all part of the day, and obviously this acted as a press conferences for the launches for quite a few of these teams. Obviously some more cars have appeared, the Ferrari, for example, the Haas. We're not going to talk about those on this podcast, but we will get to them later in the week, or certainly between now and testing starting in the middle of next week. But for now, we're going to get thrown out of here because it's very much late. So thanks very much, John. Thanks, Charlie. Excellent first appearance. You can come again to join us in the future. And we're going to have loads more launches, loads more cars turning up. So stay with us for everything you need to know from the world of Formula One.
The Athletic.